Wind Fury Totem is back, and Searing Totem, and Healing Stream Totems, and Totems everywhere. That plus shocks, new and reworked talents, covenant abilities, and more is what you will get in today's video. The testing we were able to do on enhancement is pretty early in the alpha. Numbers, actual spells, and talents will most likely not be the same when the expansion is live, but they can help paint a picture of what the spec will end up being. First, the most obvious thing is Maelstrom is gone, as in the resource bar, and we are back to mana only. In its place we have Maelstrom Weapon that has a chance to give you a stack of Maelstrom Weapon when you hit stuff with your melee weapon. Each stack gives you a 20% cast time reduction on your next damage or healing spell and can stack to 5 times, making your spell instant. This is a very nostalgic passive that removes the builder-spender playstyle of the BFA version of enhancement. It's nice and kinda makes room for other abilities to join the rotation. Since we are on the topic of passives, the Stormbringer passive has been nerfed and now will not empower the Storm Strike with additional damage, but it will reset its cooldown and make it not trigger a cooldown. It's too early to tell if this will end up as an overall nerf, although its effect is indeed nerfed. A lot of other things change for enhancement and numbers are all relative at this point. Moving on, part of the base Shaman kit, so not enhancement specific, we get Searing Totem and Healing Stream Totem baseline. Searing Totem is a 30-second cooldown and lasts for 15 seconds, and right now does incredible mediocre damage. Less than a single lightning bolt. However, both totems are behaving like dots and hots and currently seem to be affected by haste. How much they actually end up being so remains to be seen when we can do some sims and maths in future alpha builds. Nice buttons to press though, especially the Healing Stream, which with one global cooldown you can add some utility to your group. Oh, and Lightning Shield is baseline for all specs now. It has been dumbed down to a simple damage return on hits. This feels like a loss from its live iteration, but hey, baseline is baseline. Baseline, you also get Frost Shock and Flame Shock. Flame Shock seems to be the DPS option here, decent damage and you can have it up on multiple targets. Frost Shock does significantly less damage but does apply the 50% slow and shares a cooldown with Flame Shock. Clearly you need to choose which to cast, and so far unless you need the 50% slow, casting Frost Shock seems like a DPS loss instead of using the GCD for something else. These two seem to have replaced Flame Tongue and Frostbrand, the spells we have on live right now, at least in their place in the rotation and interaction with the spec. Chain Heal is also seeing a return, and with the current gear level, heals more than Healing Surge on single target but costs more mana. And yes, mana can be an issue, meaning you cannot heal forever. All of these being baseline gives enhancement the proper hybrid shaman feel it's supposed to have. One other thing that's baseline and makes for a perfect segue is Flame Tongue Weapon. You can cast this on a weapon as an imbue that gives your melee swings extra fire damage. Remember? Boy, do I remember this shit from 15 years ago, dude. And with this, we move into the enhancement specific abilities, with Wind Fury Weapon coming back as a weapon imbue, so not a passive. Fundamentally, it seems Blizzard kinda wants us to have both of these on, with Flame Tongue on the offhand for that lava lash damage. Certain talents affect one or the other imbue, however, and I cannot tell if there will be a viable way to play with either 2 Wind Furies or 2 Flame Tongues, at least at this point. More on the synergy later. Wind Fury Totem. Yes, there we go. Now, there is a little difference between the totem and the actual weapon imbue. As far as I was able to test them, they both affect you at the same time and they both work based on their tooltip. For the purpose of explaining, I will use the current alpha numbers so you get a picture. My main hand hits for 211 damage and offhand for 111 damage. Something like that. The weapon imbue has a chance to proc 2 other attacks, each dealing 84 damage. The totem gives you a 10% chance for your main weapon to swing again. So far, the totem gives more raw damage but has a lower proc chance. When you combine them both, you actually have a lot of auto attacks. If you put Wind Fury on your offhand, the damage procs are also halved as you would expect. The only thing I don't know for sure is if all of these extra auto attacks will work towards getting you more Maelstrom weapon charges than having a Flame Tongue on the offhand. This is a question for the big brains theory crafters, but if they do, then maybe we can get some builds going with some variety. This can give enhancement so much potential as a spec. This pretty much covers the abilities that are coming back. To be fair with you, Shaman as a class is looking very good in Shadowlands, at least design-wise. If the numbers can be tweaked, where we won't end up with a cookie-cutter talent build with no variety, I am kinda seriously considering it as a possible main. Currently on the alpha, we can only play with 2 Covenant abilities. It's hard to have an opinion on what the Ardenwald and Maldraxxus ones are and do, but things are looking good for those to be in the game in the near future. Meanwhile, Vesper Totem. Man, this is a fun ability to cast. The way it works is that you put the totem down, and when you deal damage with spells or abilities, it radiates AoE damage on up to 6 targets. It can do this 3 times for 3 damaging abilities, and equivalently 3 times for 3 healing abilities. It actually rounds up perfectly the hybridness that is Shaman and by extension Enhancement. Being on a very short cooldown makes it interesting to use, and probably will use it at every dungeon pack or every other dungeon pack, and maybe a few times per raid boss. Other than this, not much to say. It's a totem, it does cool things. The only other argument we can have is its numbers. So far, so good. Revendreth brings to us Chain Harvest. It's a casted spell for a 1.5 minute cooldown, jumping between allies and enemies, dealing damage and healing 5 times each. Every time it crits, it reduces the cooldown that it has by 5 seconds. As a concept, this seems pretty good. Not only that, it's a long cast that is reduced by Maelstrom weapons, so double yay. Numbers so far seem a bit lackluster for a Covenant ability with a supposed 1 minute or more cooldown. Hopefully the tuning will fix this in future builds so we can give it a proper test. There have been quite a few changes to the talents, considering the resource system has been entirely replaced. Boulderfish remained the same, and Hot Hands moved down, and in its place, Forceful Winds makes a stand. Wind Fury makes each successive Wind Fury attack within 15 seconds to deal 50% extra damage, so a bit lower than what we have on live, and there's no Maelstrom resource to generate, so maybe a simpler version. In Lightning Shield's place, we get Elemental Blast, another castable spell, also reduced by Maelstrom weapon. It deals an initial damage and increases one of your secondary stats by a flat amount. This is too specific to talk about without proper simming to figure out how good it is. Being a castable spell makes it awkward because, by its nature, you want to cast it on cooldown, and spending seconds to cast it or keeping it until it's instant is not 100% sure how good it will be. But hey, more buns! And that's not all. Second row has Landslide with the same effect, with Hot Hands redesigned. Attacking with Flame Tongue imbued has a 5% chance to reduce the general cooldown of Lava Lash by 75% and increase its damage by 100% for 8 seconds, making it so far on par with Stormstrike in damage, or as close as you can get. This is a really interesting talent, giving your rotation every now and again a short window of Lava Lash focus, since outside this, Lava Lash does about half of Stormstrike's damage. So having the option to swap your focus to a different ability makes the rotation interesting, with moments of, oh, it's that time to press this more than I normally do. Adds variety and keeps you engaged during a fight, and to be fair, this kind of mechanic is what all specs should get in one way or another. Totem Mastery only had one minor change, where you get 2% haste instead of the passive Maelstrom generation. I would argue that the 2% haste is better, and so far, a more interesting and impactful version than the BFA one. Next up is the utility role with no changes. Moving further down, the talents are the same but redesigned. So, not the same? I'm a master at writing these scripts. Hailstorm now makes your Storm Strike reset the cooldown on your shocks. Damage-wise, this could be good in AoE where you want to place as many flame shocks as you can, and maybe PvP to keep some high uptime on the slow. Interesting twist to the rotation. Searing Assault is now a 1-minute cooldown and you strike your enemy with fire damage, making your Searing Totem attack 100% faster, and Flame Shock period reduced by 67%. What the fuck does period mean? Is it that time of the month when it definitely reduces the intervals between the ticks Flame Shock does, meaning more damage, and as far as I was able to tell, it applies to all active Flame Shocks, making it really interesting in AoE, particularly Cleave, since I imagine it's going to be hard to have normally 3 ticking Flame Shocks. Overcharge has also been changed. Now with a 1.5 minute cooldown, you instantly get 5 stacks of Maelstrom weapon on activation and 1 extra every second for 10 seconds. I can see this talent working nice with Elemental Blast and Storm Creeper down the road. Even Chain Harvest, where you have a bunch of strong spells that you don't want to actually sit through their normal cast times, to put them on cooldown. Outside of that, I mean, it puts your passive on steroids for 10 seconds every 1.5 minutes. It's cool, but I keep asking, why? Next row remains the same utility-wise, with the 6-1 having some changes once again. Specifically, Fury of Air is gone, and in its place you have Stormkeeper. It's a bit of a dumbed-down version of the elemental counterpart, in that you just get the 2 empowered casts that you can spend on Lightning Bolt or Chain Lightning. The cool part about it is that its cast time is reduced by Maelstrom weapon. The shitty part about it is the GCD. You either hard cast it or keep it on cooldown until it's instant, press it, then wait for the GCD window to pop your 2 instant zappies. The damage of them is pretty nice, a little less than Storm Strike, meaning they won't have the highest priority, but this, on top of everything else, Enhancement has in Shadowlands, and you have quite a few options to use when you cannot melee the target. I can definitely see a high skill cap in managing these to increase uptime and overall damage performance on a raid boss when you have to move away, do a mechanic, or chase things, stuff like that. Last row doesn't see any changes, so it rounds up Enhancement with still quite a few redesigns, reworks, and unprunes. Okay, so I need to make a strong argument for numbers balance because they can dictate if a lot of these new and actually fun options will be viable. Sure, you can play whatever you want, but that's not how the game works for most people, so I really hope we will not be cornered into one cookie cutter build that just outclasses every other option. Because Enhancement is really interesting right now. There are a few clear synergies between talents and abilities, giving you potential Wind Fury builds, Shock builds, Lava Lash builds, Cast Spell builds, and a combination of these. With the amounts of baseline abilities, totems, and a variety of spells, Enhancement looks like a spec that you can hardly get bored of and one that can take time to master. And this is something that personally keeps me hooked in pretty much any RPG game I play. Show me something cool, show me how cool it can be, then let me try to reach that point where I can make it shine. Very little specs have these nowadays, and Enhancement overall felt like a huge breath of fresh air. But Enhancement is not the only spec we play on Alpha, and who knows how many we will actually have the time to cover. But we will, and we will all play them on our stream, twitch.tv/MarcelianOnline. We stream 5 days a week, a combination of BFA and Shadowlands keys and raids with viewers, so it's never a dull moment. Yeah, I make sure to fall off elevators to keep you guys entertained. Don't worry about that though, I definitely do it intentionally. A special shout out and thank you to our patrons who support the channel and make all of this possible. This new video series takes extra time to work and prepare, and we couldn't have done it without your support, in the background. So yeah, check the links down below if you want to show a bit of love. Maybe you want one of these cool hoodies. Hand-drawn, sexy designed, we want only the best for you, dear viewer. Thank you for watching the video, and see you in the next one.